Hello everybody, today we're talking about the Reformation and we're looking at why the Reformation begins. And if you start by looking at the word Reformation, you're going to see the word reform in there. So that leads to why were there calls for church reform? Why did this Reformation take place? Well, it all started with a man by the name of Martin Luther. And he started to challenge the Catholic Church in 1517. And it's important to know that Martin Luther was a monk. So it wasn't like it was just somebody who didn't really know much about religion. He really knew religion, and that's when he started to challenge the question that the Reformation began. He argued that the Pope could not decide what a person had to do to get into heaven. He was really upset with the sale of indulgences, which was a new practice the Catholic Church had started in order to raise money to rebuild the St. Peter's Church in Rome. So this led to a movement in Christianity called Protestantism, and the ideas of Erasmus are kind of what led to the Reformation. Now there were many complaints against the church that Martin Luther started. He wrote them down in his 95 Theses, all right? But the big thing was people were angry with the church's focus on money. They were upset with the sale of indulgences or documents that reduced the punishment for sins, and they also believed that everyone should be able to read the Bible, that you didn't have to go to church, that it wasn't just priests that should be able to, everybody should be able to read the Bible. So let's talk a little more about Martin Luther. All right? Martin Luther was very angry by the behavior of church leaders. He also was very worried about his own soul and whether he was doing what he needed to do to get into heaven. So he wrote these 95 Theses, or arguments against the church. It was so upsetting to the Pope that the Pope eventually excommunicates him for his views. But this led to new denominations or organized branches in Christianity. So this is the time period where it's no longer if you are Christian, you're Catholic. It's, you can be a different denomination. We talked earlier in the year how there's the Catholic Church was the Christian church, but because of Martin Luther, you now have all these new denominations or other organized branches of Christianity that come about. So let's talk about John Calvin now. John Calvin was influenced by the ideas of Luther. Now, he lived in France, but France was not friendly to Protestants, so he moved to Geneva, Switzerland, where he was able to gain a following. He agreed with Luther that faith was more important than doing good works. That if you wanted to get into heaven, you had to have this belief in God and do what God wanted you to do, not just by being a good person and doing good things. He also believed in predestination, or that God has planned the outcome of your life. That everything you do in life has already been planned by God. That God already has chosen who goes to heaven and who doesn't. That's predestination, and Calvin was big on predestination. One other thing he was big on that went against what Catholic churches did was he believed that congregations, or the members of the church, should choose their own leaders. So that's just a little overview about the Reformation, how the Reformation began. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in class.